Want to hear something that drives people away from recovery faster than almost anything else? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Even people who have never set foot in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting know those words. It's from the famous first step of AA. And for many, that's exactly where the conversation ends. Because the moment they hear the word powerless, they translate it into something very specific. They hear weak. They hear defeated. They hear less than. And if you're anything like I was, you reject it immediately. Not because you don't have a problem, but because you refuse to see yourself that way. I'm Dr. Donald Crow. I practiced medicine for 40 years and took care of countless people whose lives were being eroded by alcohol. I saw the damage. I saw the devastation. But that was not enough to keep me from being trapped in the same cycle where alcohol was my master. I've now been sober for nearly 28 years, and today I'm going to talk about how reframing one idea was central to opening the door to that new life. When I first encountered the idea of powerlessness, I couldn't get past it. I had spent my entire life believing that effort solved problems. If something wasn't working, the answer was simple. Try harder, think smarter, apply more discipline. That approach had worked for me in medicine. It had worked for me in my life. So why would alcohol be any different? The idea that I was powerless over anything felt like an insult to everything I believed about myself. So in those first few weeks after I quit drinking, I did what a lot of people do. I learned just enough about recovery to sound convincing. I said the right words. I checked the right boxes. I told people, yes, I understand, alcohol is stronger than me. But that wasn't what I believed. What I actually believed was this: I just haven't figured out how to drink correctly yet. And that belief is subtle, but it's everything. Because as long as you believe that there is a correct way to drink, you'll continue to search for it. I certainly did. You may stop for a while. You may accumulate weeks, months, or even a year of sobriety. But in the background, the experiment is still running. You're still asking the question, now that I've reset, maybe this time will be different. That's exactly what happened to me. After a long period of abstinence, my life improved. I felt better physically. I had new sources of enjoyment. I had distance from the wreckage alcohol had caused. And that distance created a dangerous illusion. It made me question whether I had changed my relationship with alcohol. I began to wonder. So I approached it with scientific curiosity, carefully, methodically, and rationally. I started small, not even a full drink, just a trace amount of alcohol diluted heavily. Something so minor it couldn't possibly have an effect. And at first, it didn't. Or at least that's what I told myself. So I repeated it. Then I increased it slightly. Still no obvious intoxication. Still no immediate consequence. And this is where the misunderstanding of powerlessness becomes critical. Because I was looking for the wrong effect. I thought the danger of alcohol was intoxication. But for me, that's not where the real problem begins. The shift happened quietly. No dramatic moment, no obvious loss of control. Just a subtle change, a thought, a pull, a growing sense of anticipation. Even without feeling drunk, something had been activated. A switch in my brain had been flipped. Once alcohol entered my system, even in small amounts, it created a neurochemical response that I could not override. Not with logic, not with discipline, not with experience. The desire for more wasn't a failure of character. It was a function of biology. And as I ever so slightly increased the amount, something predictable followed. My ability to stop weakened, not instantly, but reliably. And eventually, I was right back where I'd been before. Now this is where the idea of powerlessness began to change for me. because I started asking a different question. What if this has nothing to do with weakness? What if this is simply a matter of how my system is wired? Imagine two people standing at the door of an airplane preparing to skydive. Both are subject to gravity. Neither one can negotiate with it. Neither one can resist it through willpower. They are both powerless over gravity. Not because they're weak, but because this is the nature of reality. Now here's the difference. One of them is wearing a parachute that works. The other is not. My wife, for example, can drink occasionally. She doesn't like the way it makes her feel. She can stop easily. Her parachute functions normally. I, on the other hand, have tested mine repeatedly, and it fails. Not sometimes, every time. So the question is no longer, can I handle alcohol? The question becomes, do I want to keep jumping? This is where acceptance replaces struggle. Because once you understand that the outcome is governed by forces you don't control, the decision becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. I'm powerless over alcohol in the same way that I'm powerless over gravity. Once I step into it, the process begins, and I do not get to decide how it ends. That realization removes something that has been exhausting me for years. The constant negotiation, the constant testing, the constant belief that this time would be different. Now, there are two ways to interpret this idea of powerlessness. One interpretation is limiting. I'm powerless, therefore I'm stuck. The other interpretation is liberating. I'm powerless over this one thing, but I still control the most important decision of all, whether or not I take that drink. Because the only moment where full control exists is before that first drink. After that, control becomes progressively compromised. There's also an uncomfortable truth here. We don't get to choose our biology. Some people can drink without consequences. Others cannot. We can debate why. Genetics, neurochemistry, environment, all probably play a role. But in the end, the mechanism matters less than the pattern. If exposure leads to craving and craving leads to loss of control, then the conclusion is straightforward. And here's where this becomes useful. Because when I stopped framing this as a personal failure and started framing it as a predictable biological response, something shifted. I no longer needed to prove anything. I no longer needed to test anything. Alcohol simply moved into a different category. Not forbidden, not tempting, just incompatible. And that's the quiet transformation of sobriety. It stops feeling like a restriction and starts feeling like alignment with reality. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're working with reality as it is. So when you hear that phrase again, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, consider the possibility that it's not describing weakness. It's describing a boundary, a rule, a condition of the system. And like all such conditions, it asks only one thing of you, not that you overcome it, but that you understand it. Because once you do, the decision to quit drinking that once felt impossible becomes obvious. And in many cases, with a little work, it becomes natural. If you're still deciding whether your drinking makes sense and want some assistance in assessing this, I have a free downloadable checklist called the CCBBAA checklist to help you determine if your drinking is still rational. And paired with this is a pre-recovery blueprint free to download to help you prepare if you have a desire to quit. And if you're ready to make that commitment to quit, having a plan rather than an intention is the best way to assure success. To help you achieve the important 90-day milestone of sobriety, I have created a 90-day sobriety survival kit that will help you reassess your understanding of your relationship with alcohol, as well as specific actions to help you reach this important sobriety milestone. I left links to information about all of these in the description below. Please check them out. And also, to help the channel grow, please subscribe, like, and comment below. I read all the comments and use them to help create future content. Also, why not check out this video where I describe what comes next after sobriety. I'm Dr. Donald Crow, and I'll see you in the next one.